The alarm on my scanner screamed before I even saw the ship. Red light bounced off the broken metal walls around me, and my heart jumped into my throat. I was standing inside a dead vessel, deep in a forgotten part of space, looking for anything worth selling. My name is Nolan Carter, and 3 years ago, I was a soldier. Now I am just a man who finds old wrecks and sells their parts to stay alive. The wreck I had boarded that day was not supposed to have anyone alive inside it. My scanner had marked it as empty, but the alarm did not lie. Something, or someone, was moving 2 levels below me. I gripped my light and my blade tighter and moved toward the sound. The corridor was narrow, and the air smelled like rust and burnt wire. Every step echoed. I told myself it was probably just a broken machine, still running on old power, tricking my scanner into thinking it was alive. I told myself that, but my hands did not believe it. When I reached the lower deck, I found a door sealed shut with a manual lock, the kind used for prisoners, not machines. My stomach turned. I had seen locks like this before, back when I served. They were not for keeping equipment safe. They were for keeping something that could scream trapped inside. I forced the lock open with my tool, and the door slid apart with a groan. The room beyond was dark, lit only by a single flickering strip of light on the ceiling, and there, chained to the wall, was a girl. She was not human. Her skin held a faint blue shimmer, like moonlight caught under water, and her eyes were large, gold, and full of fear. She flinched hard when the light hit her, pressing herself against the wall as if she could disappear into it. Thin chains wrapped around her wrists, digging into skin that looked far too fragile for this kind of cruelty. For a moment, neither of us moved. I had seen strange things in my years of service, but I had never stood this close to a living being from another world. She was shaking, and not just from cold. "I am not here to hurt you," I said slowly, keeping my voice calm the way I once did with frightened people pulled from ruined buildings. "I am going to get you out." She said nothing. Her eyes moved from my face to the blade in my hand, and she pulled back further, as far as the chains would allow. I understood then. She thought I was one of them, whoever had done this to her. I knelt down, keeping a careful distance, and set the blade on the floor beside me, sliding it away so she could see I meant no harm. "My name is Nolan," I said. "I am not one of the people who put you here. I did not even know you existed until a minute ago." Her breathing slowed, just slightly. She studied me, the way someone studies a predator they are not sure has finished hunting. "Please," she finally whispered, her voice cracked and dry, "do not lie to me." "I am not lying," I said. "I do not know who you are or where you come from, but nobody deserves to be chained like this. Nobody." I moved closer, testing her reaction with each inch, and when she did not flinch away completely, I reached for the lock holding her wrists. My hands were steady, though my mind was racing. Every second we spent here was a risk. Wrecks like this were sometimes guarded, sometimes rigged, and whoever had built this cell would not be far. The lock was old but sturdy. It took me a moment to find the release, my fingers working quickly while she watched me with those wide gold eyes. When the chain finally snapped open, she gasped, pulling her arms to her chest, rubbing at the raw skin the metal had left behind. "You are free," I said. "But we are not safe yet. This ship might not be as empty as it looks." She looked at me again, longer this time, as if trying to read something written beneath my skin. "Why?" she asked. "Why would you help someone you do not know? Someone who is not even your kind?" I thought about that question more than I expected to. The truth was simple, even if it sounded foolish out loud. "Because leaving you here was never something I could do," I said. "Where I come from, we do not walk past someone in a cage, not even once." She did not answer, but something in her expression softened, just barely, like a crack of light through a closed door. I helped her to her feet. She was unsteady, her legs weak from being restrained for who knew how long, but she managed to stand with my support. Up close, I could see the exhaustion carved into her face, days or weeks of fear layered over each other. "What is your name?" I asked gently. She hesitated, glancing toward the door as though speaking her name out loud might summon danger. Illyra, she finally said. Illyra Visarion. The name meant nothing to me then. I did not know, in that moment, that I was standing beside the daughter of one of the most powerful rulers among the stars. I only knew that she was frightened, injured, and needed to leave this place immediately. "All right, Illyra," I said, "let us get you somewhere safe." We moved slowly through the corridor, my ears straining for any sound that did not belong. The ship groaned around us, metal settling under its own weight, but nothing else stirred. Illyra leaned against me as we walked, her steps growing steadier with each passing minute, though her eyes never stopped scanning the shadows. "Who did this to you?" I asked quietly, as we reached the stairs leading up toward my ship. "Raiders," she said, her voice tight. "They found my transport disabled in open space. I thought they were rescuers, at first." Her jaw tightened. They were not. I felt something cold settle in my chest. I had encountered raiders before, men and women who had given up every shred of decency in exchange for profit. They collected anything valuable, and apparently that included living beings who could be traded or ransomed. "They wanted to use you," I said, understanding now why the cell had looked the way it did, as leverage. Illyra nodded, her eyes dropping to the floor. "My mother would trade half her fleet to have me returned unharmed. They knew that." That single sentence told me more than she probably intended. Her mother was not just a parent worried for her child. Her mother commanded something vast enough that an entire fleet was worth mentioning. I did not press further, not yet. There would be time for questions once we were away from this drifting tomb of metal. We reached the stairwell leading to the upper deck, and I helped her climb, one careful step after another. My ship was docked just beyond the far airlock, close enough that I could already picture the moment we would finally be off this wreck and moving through open space, away from whatever had left her chained in the dark. That was when I heard it. Footsteps, heavy and deliberate, echoing from the deck above us. Illyra froze beside me, her whole body going rigid. "They are back," she whispered, her voice barely audible. I pulled her gently behind me, positioning myself between her and the stairwell, my hand finding the blade at my side once more. Whatever waited above, I was not about to let it take her back into that cell. "Stay close to me," I said quietly. "We are almost out. I am not letting anyone touch you again." She looked at me, and for the first time since I had found her, something other than fear crossed her expression. It looked almost like hope, fragile and uncertain, but there, and in that moment, standing in the dim, rusted corridor of a dying ship, I made a silent promise to myself. Whatever it took, whoever stood in our way, I was getting her home. The footsteps grew louder, closer, and somewhere above us, a rough voice called out into the dark, searching for something they believed was still theirs to control. They were about to learn otherwise. I raised my light toward the stairwell, my pulse steady, despite the tightening in my chest. Illyra pressed close behind me, her breathing shallow, her fingers gripping the back of my jacket like it was the only solid thing left in her world. "Whoever is down there," the voice called from above, echoing through the metal shell of the ship, "bring the cargo back up, now." Cargo. That single word made my blood run cold. To them, she was never a person. She was a payment waiting to be collected. I did not answer. I simply waited, watching the top of the stairwell, counting the seconds until whoever it was decided to come looking themselves. It did not take long. A man appeared at the top of the stairs first, broad-shouldered, wearing patched armor that had clearly seen better days. His eyes narrowed the moment his light found me standing there, blade steady in my hand. "You are not one of ours," he said, his tone shifting from confusion to caution. "No," I said calmly, "and she is not your cargo." He laughed, short and humorless, glancing behind me toward Illyra. "You have no idea what you just walked into, friend. That thing behind you is worth more than your whole life combined." "She has a name," I said, and she is leaving with me." His hand moved toward the weapon at his hip, slow and deliberate, testing whether I would flinch. I did not. "Last chance," he said. "Walk away, and we forget this happened." I felt aHFY's grip tighten on my jacket, her breath catching. I did not look back at her. I kept my eyes locked on him, letting him see that I had no intention of stepping aside. "I am not walking away," I said simply. "Not this time." For a moment, the corridor fell completely silent, the kind of silence that comes right before something breaks. And then, without another word, he moved. I was faster. The raider lunged, but I had already stepped sideways, letting his weight carry him past me instead of into me. He stumbled against the wall, and before he could turn, I had my arm locked around his, forcing the weapon from his grip. It clattered to the floor and skidded toward the stairs. He grunted, twisting hard, trying to break free. But years of training do not disappear just because a man spends his days trading scrap metal for meals. I pinned him against the wall, my forearm pressed firm against his chest, enough to stop him from moving, not enough to cause real harm. "Where are the others?" I said, my voice low and controlled. He spat toward my boots, defiant even now. "You think there is only me? The whole crew knows she is here. You will not make it off this wreck." Behind me, aHFY had pressed herself into the corner, her golden eyes wide, watching the exchange with a kind of stunned disbelief, as though she could not decide whether to be afraid of him or of me. "How many?" I asked again, tightening my grip just slightly. He hesitated, then muttered, "4, maybe 5, spread across the upper decks." I released him just enough to let him breathe, then struck once, precisely, at the base of his neck. He crumpled to the floor, unconscious but breathing steadily. I did not enjoy doing that. I never had. But there was no time to explain myself, and no room for half measures when someone else's life depended on the outcome. I turned back to aHFY, who was staring at me with an expression I could not quite place, somewhere between fear and something softer. "You did not kill him," she said quietly. "No reason to," I said, kneeling to retrieve his fallen weapon and tuck it into my belt. "He will wake up with a headache and a story he probably will not tell anyone." She swallowed, her eyes lingering on the man slumped against the wall. Where I come from, mercy like that is rare, especially toward those who have done harm. "Maybe," I said, offering my hand to help her forward again, "but cruelty is not something I carry with me, if I can help it. Now, we need to move before the others realize something went wrong." She took my hand, her fingers cold but steady this time, and we continued up the stairwell, moving quickly but carefully, avoiding the open sections of the corridor where the ceiling lights had failed completely. The upper deck was worse than I expected. Wires hung loose from broken panels, and the floor was littered with crates, some marked with symbols I did not recognize, others clearly stamped with trade labels from systems I had only heard about in passing. This ship had been used for far more than holding one prisoner. It was a hub for exactly the kind of business that made honest work in this part of space nearly impossible to find. We moved through the maze of crates, my light sweeping ahead of us, searching for any sign of movement. aHFY stayed close, her steps quieter than I expected, years of caution clearly built into her instincts, despite her exhaustion. "You said your mother would trade a fleet for you," I said quietly, keeping my voice low as we moved. "That is not a small thing to say." She hesitated before answering, glancing at me sideways. "My mother rules the Veloth Dominion," she said. "It is not something I say lightly. I am the only child she has left." The words settled over me, heavier than I expected. I had rescued strangers before, pulled people from collapsed buildings, and burning wreckage during my years of service, but I had never once considered that the person I was protecting might be the heir to an empire spanning more stars than I could count. "That explains the chains," I said. "And the guards. It explains why they thought capturing me would make them rich beyond anything they could imagine," she said, bitterness creeping into her voice. "They were right, in a way. My mother would have paid anything. Would have. I repeated. Meaning she still might, once she learns you are safe. aHFY's expression shifted, something flickering behind her eyes that looked almost like grief. She believes I am gone, she said softly. It has been many days since my transport was found abandoned. By now, she may already believe the worst. I felt a pang of urgency at that. A grieving mother, especially one who commanded fleets, was not someone who would simply wait patiently for news. If aHFY was right, there could already be search parties combing through this region of space, desperate and possibly dangerous in their desperation. Then we need to get you a message to her as soon as possible, I said. But first, we need to survive the next few minutes. As if summoned by my words, a shout rang out from further down the deck, followed by the heavy thud of boots against metal flooring. More of them, and closer than I had hoped. I pulled aHFY behind a stack of crates, pressing a finger to my lips. She nodded, understanding immediately, her body going still and silent despite her exhaustion. We waited, listening as the footsteps grew louder, accompanied by voices arguing over something I could not quite make out. He said the cargo was secured, one voice muttered. If it is gone, that is on him, not us. Doesn't matter whose fault it is, another snapped back. If she is loose on this ship, we lose everything. Spread out. My grip tightened on the weapon I had taken earlier. 4, maybe 5, the unconscious man had said. If they were splitting up to search, that gave us a small window, but it also meant the odds of running into one of them directly had just increased significantly. I glanced at aHFY, who was watching me with an unspoken question in her eyes. I nodded toward the far end of the deck, where a faint outline suggested another stairwell leading toward the airlock where my ship was docked. She nodded back, understanding without needing words. We moved as quietly as we could, weaving between crates, staying low, using the shadows cast by broken lighting to our advantage. Twice, we froze as footsteps passed close by, close enough that I could hear the raiders breathing, arguing about which direction to search next. Each time, luck, or perhaps simple carelessness on their part, kept us hidden. When we finally reached the stairwell, my chest was tight with the effort of staying silent for so long. aHFY looked just as strained, her hand trembling slightly as she gripped the railing. Almost there, I whispered, and she nodded, though I could see doubt flickering behind her eyes. Doubt, and something else. Trust, tentative and new, but present. We descended quickly, the stairwell leading directly toward the section where I had originally docked. My ship, small and unremarkable compared to the wreck surrounding it, waited just beyond the final airlock, close enough now that I could almost believe we would make it without further trouble. That was when the alarm blared, loud and sudden, echoing through the entire vessel. Someone had found the unconscious man. They know, aHFY said, her voice tight with fear. Then we run, I said, grabbing her hand and pulling her forward. We sprinted the final stretch of corridor, the alarm growing louder behind us, mixed now with shouting voices calling out orders, coordinating a search that was no longer quiet or careful. I could hear the raiders moving fast, closing in from multiple directions. The airlock came into view, and beyond it, through the small viewport, I could see the outline of my ship waiting exactly where I had left it. Relief flooded through me, but it was short-lived. A figure stepped into the corridor ahead of us, blocking the path to the airlock entirely. She was different from the man I had faced earlier, her stance far more controlled, her weapon already raised and steady. This one was not going to hesitate. "Going somewhere," she said, her voice calm despite the chaos unfolding around us. I pushed aHFY slightly behind me, my mind racing through options, none of them particularly good. Direct confrontation was risky, especially with a weapon already aimed, but retreating meant running straight into the search party closing in from behind. "We are leaving," I said firmly, "and she is coming with us." The woman's eyes flicked toward aHFY, something calculating behind her gaze. "The Dominion princess," she said slowly, almost admiring. "Do you have any idea what she is worth?" "She is worth more than any price you could name," I said. But not to you. The woman's finger tightened on the trigger, and for a moment, everything seemed to slow down, the way it always did, in moments where a single decision meant the difference between walking away and not walking away at all. I moved first. I dropped low and drove forward, closing the distance before she could adjust her aim. My shoulder caught her at the waist, knocking her weapon arm upward just as it fired, the shot searing into the ceiling above us instead of finding its mark. Sparks rained down, and aHFY cried out, stumbling back against the wall. The woman recovered fast, twisting out of my hold and swinging an elbow toward my jaw. I caught the blow on my forearm, the impact rattling through my bones, but I held my footing, driving forward again before she could reset her stance. This time, I caught her wrist, twisting the weapon free and sending it skidding across the floor. She did not give up easily. She drove her knee toward my side, and I grunted as the impact landed, stumbling back a step. But years of training had taught me how to absorb a hit without losing focus, and I recovered quickly, closing the gap once more before she could press the advantage. The fight ended the way the first one had, with a precise strike that left her crumpled against the wall, unconscious but breathing. I did not linger to check on her further. The alarm was still blaring, and the voices behind us were closing in fast. "Nolan," aHFY called, her voice sharp with urgency, already moving toward the airlock controls. I joined her, punching in the override sequence I had used to first gain access to the ship. The mechanism groaned, resisting for a heartbeat before finally releasing, the airlock door sliding open with a hiss of escaping air. We rushed through, sealing it behind us just as the first raiders rounded the corner, their shouts muffled by the closing door. Ahead of us, my ship waited, its ramp still lowered exactly as I had left it. We sprinted the final distance, and the moment we crossed onto the ramp, I slammed my hand against the control panel, sealing the ship's outer hatch behind us. The sound of the raiders pounding against the airlock echoed faintly through the hull, but it no longer mattered. We were inside, and within seconds, I had the engines spinning to life. "Strap in," I called, guiding aHFY toward the small passenger seat before dropping into the pilot's chair myself. The ship shuddered as it detached from the wreck, drifting free before the engines caught fully and pushed us away, the derelict vessel shrinking rapidly in the viewport behind us. I did not slow down until the wreck was nothing more than a distant shape against the endless dark of space. Only then did I finally let myself breathe. aHFY sat quietly beside me, her hands still trembling slightly, though whether from cold, fear, or simple disbelief, I could not tell. For a long moment, neither of us spoke, the hum of the engines the only sound filling the small cabin. "We made it," she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper, as though she still could not quite believe it. "We did," I said, allowing myself a small measure of relief. "Now we need to figure out how to get you home safely, without running into anyone else looking to make a profit off you." She nodded, though her expression grew distant, thoughtful. "My mother will have search vessels scattered across several systems by now," she said. "If we can reach any of her outposts, they will recognize me immediately." "That is good," I said. "Do you know the coordinates of the nearest one?" She hesitated, then shook her head slowly. "I was unconscious when the raiders first captured me. I do not know how far we have traveled from Dominion space." That complicated things considerably. Without knowing our position relative to her territory, we would be navigating blind, hoping to stumble across the correct signal in a galaxy far too vast for guesswork. "Then we will figure it out together," I said, offering what I hoped was a reassuring smile. "First, let us get you something to eat and somewhere comfortable to rest. You look like you have not had either in longer than you should have." For the first time since I had found her, something close to a genuine smile crossed her face, small and fragile, but real. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for everything." I nodded, turning back to the controls to plot a course away from the region entirely, putting as much distance as possible between us and the wreck before anyone else came looking. Once satisfied that we were clear, I guided her toward the small galley at the back of the ship, pulling together whatever rations I had stored for the journey. She ate slowly at first, almost cautiously, as though expecting the food to be taken away at any moment. I said nothing, simply sitting across from her, letting her eat in peace while I studied the star charts on a small display nearby, searching for any familiar markers that might indicate Dominion territory. "You're kind," she said eventually, breaking the silence. "Are you all like this? Willing to risk everything for someone you do not know?" I considered the question carefully before answering. "Not all of us," I admitted, "but enough. It is something we are taught, I think, that leaving someone behind when you have the ability to help is not something we can live with easily." She studied me for a long moment, her golden eyes thoughtful. "Where I come from, strength is often measured by what you take, not what you give," she said. "I did not expect to find kindness among the stars, especially not from a species I had only heard described as dangerous." That caught my attention. "Dangerous," I repeated. "What have you heard about humans?" She hesitated, glancing away briefly. "Whispers, mostly," she said. "That your kind fought wars unlike any other species has fought. That you do not know how to surrender, even when facing certain loss. Some say humans are the reason several ancient conflicts ended the way they did, simply because your people refused to stop, no matter the cost." I sat with that for a moment, unsure how to respond. It was not entirely untrue. Humanity's history was filled with both great cruelty and great sacrifice, often within the very same conflicts. But hearing it described that way, through the eyes of someone from another world entirely, made it feel strange, almost mythical. "We have made mistakes," I said honestly, "more than I could ever count. But we have also learned, slowly, that strength without kindness is not really strength at all, just cruelty wearing a different mask." Illyra was quiet for a long moment, considering my words carefully. "My mother would find that philosophy unusual," she said finally. "Among my people, mercy is often seen as weakness, something to be exploited by those who do not share the same restraint." "Maybe," I said. "Or maybe mercy is simply harder than cruelty, and that is exactly why it matters more." She looked at me then, something shifting behind her eyes, a kind of quiet realization settling over her features. "You truly believe that," she said, not quite a question. "I do," I said simply. The conversation drifted after that, moving toward lighter topics as the hours passed. She asked about Earth, about the strange customs and traditions of my world, and I found myself explaining things I had not thought about in years, simple things like shared meals, seasons changing, the way humans celebrated small victories alongside great ones. In turn, she told me fragments of her own world, careful at first, then gradually more open, describing the vast cities of the Veloth Dominion, the ceremonies marking important transitions in a person's life, and finally, hesitantly, about her mother. "She was not always a ruler," Illyra said softly. "Before the crown, she was simply my mother, someone who used to tell me stories about the stars before I ever understood what they truly were." "She sounds like someone worth returning to," I said gently. Illyra's eyes glistened briefly, though she blinked the emotion away quickly. "She is the only family I have left," she said. "My father passed many years ago, and my mother has ruled alone since, carrying more weight than any single person should have to carry." I understood that kind of weight all too well, having carried my own burdens since leaving service, the memories of choices made under impossible circumstances. It was strange, finding common ground with someone from an entirely different world, yet here we were, two strangers bound together by circumstance, slowly becoming something else entirely. Hours passed in quiet conversation, the ship drifting steadily through open space, until finally, my scanner picked up a faint signal, distant but unmistakable, a transmission pattern unlike anything I had encountered before. "Illyra," I said, drawing her attention to the display. "Does this mean anything to you?" She leaned forward, studying the pattern intently, and her eyes widened almost immediately. "That is a Dominion relay beacon," she said, excitement creeping into her voice for the first time since I had found her. "If we follow that signal, it should lead us toward the nearest outpost." Relief flooded through me, quickly followed by renewed caution. Reaching Dominion space safely was one thing. Convincing an entire outpost that a lone human pilot was not a threat, while escorting their missing princess, was an entirely different challenge altogether. "Then we follow it," I said, adjusting our course toward the faint signal. "But aHFY, once we arrive, things may become complicated. Your people may not trust me the way you have come to." She looked at me, determination settling firmly across her features. "Then I will make certain they understand," she said firmly. "You risked everything for me, Nolan. I will not allow fear or misunderstanding to erase that truth." I nodded, grateful for her conviction, though a small part of me remained uneasy. We were about to cross into territory ruled by beings far more powerful than myself, carrying nothing but a small ship, a handful of supplies, and the trust of a princess who had only known me for less than a day. As the ship adjusted course, angling toward the distant signal, I could not shake the feeling that the true challenge was only just beginning. Surviving raiders had been difficult enough. Surviving diplomacy, especially with a grieving and possibly desperate ruler awaiting news of her missing daughter, might prove to be an entirely different kind of battle. The stars stretched endlessly ahead of us, guiding the way toward whatever awaited on the other side of that signal, and for the first time since this entire ordeal began, I found myself hoping, quietly and fiercely, that we would make it there safely, together. The signal grew stronger with every passing hour, until finally, a cluster of lights appeared on the horizon of space, distant at first, then rapidly resolving into the unmistakable shapes of starships, dozens of them, arranged in careful formation around a massive outpost that gleamed faintly against the darkness. "That is a Dominion border station," aHFY said, leaning forward eagerly, her exhaustion momentarily forgotten. "We are close, Nolan. We are truly close." I felt a mixture of relief and apprehension settle over me as I guided the ship steadily forward, careful not to make any sudden movements that might be misread as aggression. A vessel this small, approaching such heavily guarded territory, was bound to attract attention almost immediately. Sure enough, within moments, my comm system crackled to life, a stern voice speaking in a language I did not understand, though the tone carried an unmistakable warning. "They are demanding identification," aHFY said quickly, moving closer to the comm panel. "Let me speak." I nodded, stepping aside as she leaned toward the microphone, speaking rapidly in her native tongue. The response on the other end shifted almost instantly, confusion giving way to something closer to disbelief. "What did you tell them?" I asked quietly, watching the tension building on her face. "I told them who I am," she said. "They do not believe me yet. They believe I am gone." The weight of that statement settled heavily in the cabin. If the Dominion truly believed their princess had perished, our sudden appearance would understandably be met with suspicion rather than celebration. More voices joined the transmission, urgent and overlapping, until finally, one voice rose above the rest, commanding immediate silence from the others. aHFY straightened at the sound of it, her breath catching. "That is Commander Threll," she said. "He served under my mother for many years. He will know if I am truly speaking the truth." She exchanged several more rapid sentences with the voice, her tone growing more insistent, occasionally pausing, as though answering questions I could not understand. Finally, after a tense silence, the voice on the other end shifted, softer now, almost disbelieving. "He believes me," aHFY said, relief flooding her features. "He is granting us permission to dock, but Nolan, they will board your ship the moment we arrive. Please, do exactly as they ask. Do not resist them." "I understand," I said, though unease coiled tightly in my chest. Handing over control of the situation to an armed force I had never met, especially one capable of commanding such an overwhelming display of firepower, was not something that came naturally to me. We approached the outpost slowly, guided by directional beacons transmitted from the station itself, until finally, our small ship docked within a massive hangar bay, dwarfed entirely by the surrounding vessels. The moment the ramp lowered, a contingent of armed soldiers rushed forward, their weapons raised cautiously, though not aimed directly at us. aHFY stepped forward immediately, speaking quickly, her voice firm, despite the obvious exhaustion still lingering beneath her words. The soldiers hesitated, exchanging glances, before slowly lowering their weapons, one by one, as recognition dawned across their faces. A tall figure stepped forward from among them, his expression a mixture of relief and disbelief. "Princess aHFY," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "we believed you lost." "I nearly was, Commander Threll," she said, gesturing toward me. "If not for this man, I would not be standing here today." The commander's eyes shifted toward me, studying me carefully, clearly uncertain how to process the presence of a human standing calmly within one of their most heavily guarded outposts. "He is human," Threll said slowly, as though testing the word. "He is the reason I am alive," aHFY said firmly, her tone leaving no room for argument. "He risked his life to free me, fought against those who held me captive, and guided me safely across unknown space to reach you. He is to be treated with the same respect you would offer any honored guest of the Dominion." The commander studied me a moment longer, then finally inclined his head slightly, a gesture I assumed carried significant meaning within their culture. "Then you have our gratitude," he said, "and our apologies for the caution shown upon your arrival." "Understandable," I said simply. "I would have been cautious too, in your position." aHFY turned back to Threll, her expression growing urgent. "My mother," she said. "Does she know? Has word reached her yet?" The commander's expression shifted, something heavy settling behind his eyes. "Your mother has not left the throne chamber since word of your disappearance reached her," he said quietly. "She has refused all counsel, all rest, waiting for any news, good or otherwise." aHFY's hands tightened into fists at her sides, emotion flickering across her features. "Then we must go to her immediately," she said. "She has suffered long enough." Commander Threll nodded, gesturing for us to follow as he led the way through the hangar and into the wider corridors of the outpost. The station was massive, filled with activity, soldiers and workers pausing briefly as we passed, their expressions shifting from confusion to stunned recognition as word seemed to spread rapidly ahead of us. We were led toward a smaller transport vessel, one clearly reserved for matters of importance, and within minutes we were moving again, this time toward the heart of Dominion territory, toward the throne world itself. The journey did not take long, the transport moving swiftly through carefully maintained travel lanes, escorted by several accompanying vessels. aHFY remained mostly silent throughout, her hands folded tightly in her lap, her eyes distant, clearly lost in thoughts of the reunion awaiting her. "Are you all right?" I asked quietly, breaking the silence. She glanced at me, offering a small, tired smile. "I do not know how to prepare myself for this moment," she admitted. "I have imagined it so many times since my capture, yet now that it is finally here, I find myself terrified." "That is understandable," I said gently. "But whatever happens, you are not walking into that room alone." Her expression softened at that, gratitude clear behind her tired eyes. "Thank you, Nolan," she said softly, "for more than I could ever properly express." The throne world came into view eventually, a massive planet ringed with orbital structures, its surface dotted with cities that gleamed even from high above. Our transport descended smoothly, guided toward a grand landing platform positioned just outside an enormous palace structure, its architecture unlike anything I had seen before, blending sharp geometric lines with flowing, organic curves. As we disembarked, a small procession awaited us, palace guards standing at careful attention, their expressions unreadable. Commander Threll led the way once more, guiding us swiftly through grand corridors adorned with intricate carvings and soft, glowing light fixtures embedded within the walls themselves. Finally, we arrived before a set of massive doors guarded by 2 additional soldiers who straightened immediately upon seeing aHFY's approach. Without hesitation, the doors were pushed open, revealing a vast throne chamber beyond. At the far end of the room, seated upon an elaborate throne, sat a figure whose posture radiated exhaustion and quiet, controlled grief. Her skin held the same faint blue shimmer as aHFY's, though deeper lines of stress marked her features, evidence of the toll her daughter's disappearance had taken. Queen Nyxara Visarion looked up slowly as we entered, her eyes distant at first, clearly expecting yet another report of failure. But the moment her gaze landed on aHFY, standing tall and alive within the chamber doorway, everything about her posture shattered completely. "aHFY," she whispered, the word barely audible, disbelief written plainly across her features. "Mother," aHFY said, her voice trembling now, all composure slipping away entirely. "Mother, I am back." The queen rose from her throne so quickly it nearly toppled behind her, rushing forward with a speed that seemed impossible for someone carrying such visible exhaustion. She crossed the distance between them in moments, pulling her daughter into an embrace so fierce it seemed capable of breaking through solid stone. "I thought I had lost you," the queen said, her voice cracking entirely now, tears streaming freely down her face. I truly believed." "I know, Mother," aHFY said, her own voice thick with emotion, clinging tightly to her mother in return. "I know, but I am here. I am safe." For several long moments, neither of them spoke, simply holding one another amid the quiet chamber, years of formal ceremony and royal composure forgotten entirely in favor of raw, unguarded relief. Even the guards standing nearby seemed moved, several glancing away respectfully to allow the queen this moment of unrestrained vulnerability. Eventually, the queen pulled back slightly, studying her daughter's face as though needing to confirm, beyond any doubt, that this was truly real. Her eyes then shifted, finally noticing me standing quietly near the entrance. "Who is this?" she asked, her voice steadying slightly, though emotion still lingered heavily beneath the surface. aHFY turned toward me, gesturing gently. "Mother, this is Nolan Carter," she said. "He is human. He found me aboard the wreck where the raiders held me captive, and he rescued me. He fought them, guided me safely across unfamiliar space, and brought me home. Mother, I am back, he rescued me." The queen's eyes widened slightly at that, studying me with an intensity that felt almost physical. For a moment, I wondered if I had misjudged the reception awaiting me, if gratitude might quickly give way to suspicion once the initial relief faded. Instead, to my surprise, the queen stepped forward slowly, closing the distance between us until she stood directly before me. Up close, her exhaustion was even more visible, yet her eyes carried an unmistakable weight of sincerity. "You risked your life," she said quietly, "for a stranger, for someone not even of your own kind." "She needed help," I said simply. "I could not walk away from that." The queen studied me a moment longer, before slowly, deliberately, she bowed her head toward me, a gesture that visibly stunned the surrounding guards and courtiers. "Then you have given me back the only family I have left," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "There are no words sufficient to express what that means to me, human. But know this, you have earned the eternal gratitude of the Veloth Dominion, and of a mother who feared she had lost everything." I stood there, quietly absorbing the weight of her words, uncertain how to properly respond to such an overwhelming display of gratitude from someone who commanded such vast power. aHFY watched the exchange closely, her expression carrying quiet pride alongside her lingering emotion. "Your Majesty," I said finally, choosing my words carefully, "I only did what I believe anyone should do, given the chance to help someone in need. Nothing more." The queen studied me for a long moment, something shifting behind her tired eyes, a mixture of curiosity and something that looked almost like renewed hope. "Perhaps," she said softly, "that is precisely why your kind is spoken of with such caution among the stars. Not because of cruelty, but because of a kindness so fierce it refuses to yield, even against impossible odds." The chamber fell quiet once more, the weight of her words settling over everyone present, and for the first time since this entire journey began, I allowed myself to believe, fully and completely, that Elira was finally, truly safe. The Queen ordered a feast to be prepared that very evening, a celebration meant to mark her daughter's safe return, though the mood throughout the palace remained strangely tense beneath the surface joy. I noticed it in the way certain courtiers whispered among themselves, glancing toward me, with expressions that ranged from curiosity to something closer to suspicion. Elira noticed it too. As we walked together through one of the palace gardens later that evening, waiting for the celebration to formally begin, she spoke quietly, her brow furrowed with concern. "Not everyone here will welcome your presence easily," she said. "There are those within my mother's court who view outsiders, especially humans, with deep distrust. Some believe your kind poses a threat to the natural order of things among the stars. I imagine rescuing you does not help convince them otherwise," I said, only half joking. "No," she admitted, a small smile tugging at her lips despite the seriousness of the topic. "If anything, it likely confirms their fears. A single human, walking uninvited into Dominion territory, defeating trained raiders, and earning my mother's gratitude so completely. To some, that is not comforting, it is alarming." I considered her words carefully, understanding the delicate position I now occupied. Gratitude and suspicion often walked side by side, especially among those who valued power and control above all else. Before I could respond further, a commotion erupted near the garden entrance, sharp voices rising in alarm. Elira tensed immediately, her hand instinctively reaching for mine. "Something is wrong," she said. We moved quickly toward the source of the disturbance, arriving just as Commander Threll rushed past us, his expression grim, several soldiers following close behind. "Commander," Elira called out, "what has happened?" Threll paused only briefly, his eyes flicking toward me, before settling on Elira. "A group has infiltrated the outer palace grounds," he said quickly. "We believe they are remnants of the raider network responsible for your capture, Princess." It appears they did not act entirely alone. My stomach tightened at that. "Someone within the Dominion helped them," I said, understanding immediately. Threll's jaw tightened. "We suspect as much, though we have not yet confirmed who. Whoever orchestrated this clearly intended more than simple ransom. Your survival, and your return, has forced their hand." Elira's expression hardened, fear giving way quickly to fierce determination. "Then we must stop them before they cause further harm," she said. "Princess, it would be safer for you to remain here, under guard," Threll said carefully. "I have spent enough time being kept safely out of harm's way," Elira said firmly. "I will not hide while danger threatens my home." I placed a steadying hand on her shoulder, understanding her determination completely, though concern for her safety remained heavy in my chest. "Then we face it together," I said, "but carefully. Recklessness will not serve either of us well right now." She nodded, appreciation clear in her eyes despite the tension of the moment. Commander Threll hesitated, clearly torn between duty and the princess's evident resolve, before finally relenting. "Very well," he said, "but you will remain close to my soldiers at all times, Princess. And you," he added, glancing toward me, "I would appreciate your assistance, given your unique skill set." "Happy to help," I said simply. We moved quickly through the palace corridors, following Threll and his soldiers toward the outer grounds where the intrusion had reportedly occurred. Alarms echoed faintly throughout the palace, guards rushing past in organized formations, clearly trained for exactly this kind of emergency despite the rarity of such threats reaching this deep into Dominion territory. As we approached the outer perimeter, sounds of conflict grew louder, sharp bursts of energy fire echoing against stone walls, mixed with shouted commands in a language I still did not fully understand, though the urgency behind them required no translation. Rounding a final corner, we came upon the source of the disturbance directly. A small group of intruders, roughly a dozen strong, clashed fiercely with palace guards near one of the garden's outer walls, clearly attempting to breach deeper into the palace grounds before reinforcements could arrive. "There," Threll said, pointing toward a figure standing slightly apart from the main conflict, directing the intruders with clear, practiced authority. "That is their leader." I studied the figure carefully, recognizing something familiar in his stance, the same calculated confidence I had encountered back on the wreck where aHFY had first been held captive. "I know him," I said. "He was among the raiders holding aHFY captive." Threll's expression darkened further. "Then this confirms our suspicions. Someone provided them the means and knowledge necessary to breach our defenses this deeply." There was no more time for discussion. The intruders noticed our approach, and combat erupted immediately, guards clashing against the remaining raiders in tight, controlled formations. I moved quickly, keeping aHFY shielded behind me as we advanced carefully through the chaos, searching for an opening to reach their leader directly. The man noticed me almost immediately, recognition flashing across his features. "You," he snarled, his earlier confidence replaced now with clear frustration. "You should have stayed out of matters that did not concern you." "She was never yours to take," I said firmly, stepping forward despite the ongoing conflict surrounding us. He raised his weapon, though hesitation flickered briefly behind his eyes, perhaps remembering how our previous encounter had ended. Still, desperation clearly outweighed caution, and he fired without further warning. I sidestepped quickly, the shot grazing harmlessly past me, and closed the distance before he could adjust his aim again. This confrontation ended much like our first, swift and decisive, leaving him disarmed and subdued within moments, secured quickly by nearby palace guards. With their leader captured, the remaining raiders' resistance crumbled rapidly, guards overwhelming the last few holdouts within minutes. Silence gradually returned to the garden, broken only by the soft groans of those subdued and the quiet commands of soldiers securing the area. aHFY rushed to my side the moment the conflict ended, relief evident across her features. "Are you hurt?" she asked quickly, examining me carefully despite my reassurances. "I am fine," I said, more concerned about what this means. "Someone within your mother's court aided this attack." Commander Threll approached, his expression grim despite the successful defense. "We will interrogate the captured leader thoroughly," he said. "Whoever aided them will be found and dealt with accordingly." aHFY nodded firmly, though worry lingered clearly behind her eyes. "This threat is not fully resolved yet," she said quietly. "Not until we uncover who within our own walls sought to harm us." "Then we will uncover it together," I said. "Whatever it takes." We returned to the palace shortly after, the earlier celebratory mood tempered significantly by the recent attack, though relief remained evident among those who had gathered, grateful the intrusion had been stopped before greater harm could occur. Queen Nyxara met us within the throne chamber once more, her expression a careful mixture of gratitude and simmering anger. "This betrayal will not go unanswered," she said firmly, once Threll had briefed her fully on the situation. "Whoever aided those raiders will answer for their treachery." "Mother," aHFY said carefully, "Nolan ensured their leader was captured alive. He may provide answers regarding who assisted them." The Queen's gaze shifted toward me once more, something complicated behind her tired eyes. "You continue to prove your worth, human," she said quietly. "First my daughter's life, now the safety of my entire court." "I only did what was necessary," I said simply. The Queen studied me a long moment before finally straightening, addressing not just myself, but the gathered court around us. "Let it be known," she declared firmly, "that this human, Nolan Carter, has proven himself a true friend of the Veloth Dominion, deserving of every honor and protection we are capable of offering." Murmurs spread quickly throughout the chamber, though the tone carried far more respect now than the earlier whispers of suspicion had held. aHFY stood beside me, quiet pride evident in her posture, despite the seriousness still lingering from the recent attack. Over the following days, the captured raider leader provided crucial information under careful, lawful questioning, ultimately revealing the identity of a minor court official who had secretly conspired with outside raiders, hoping to weaken the Queen's rule by eliminating her only heir. Justice was carried out swiftly and fairly, restoring a measure of stability to the court that had been shaken deeply by recent events. As calm gradually returned to the palace, Queen Nixara summoned me privately, away from the formal ceremony and public gratitude that had followed the earlier events. "I wish to offer you something meaningful," she said, once we were alone within a quieter chamber. "Wealth, land, a position of honor within my court. Anything within reason that might properly repay the debt I owe you." I considered her offer carefully, understanding the weight and sincerity behind it. Yet, thinking of everything that had brought me to this moment, I found myself uninterested in wealth or titles. "Your Majesty," I said finally, "I do not require reward for doing what I believe was simply right. If you truly wish to honor what happened, perhaps consider strengthening ties between your people and mine. Trust between our worlds, built through moments like this, seems far more valuable than anything given to me alone." The Queen studied me for a long moment, clearly surprised by my answer, before slowly, a small, genuine smile crossed her tired features. "Perhaps that is precisely why your kind continues to surprise us," she said softly. "Very well, Nolan Carter. I will begin discussions toward formal ties between the Veloth Dominion and your people. It seems a fitting tribute to what you have given me." aHFY, who had been waiting quietly nearby, stepped forward then, her expression thoughtful. "Mother," she said, "I would like permission to remain involved in these discussions personally. Nolan showed me kindness and courage I never expected to find among strangers. I believe understanding humanity further would benefit us both." The Queen glanced between us, something knowing behind her tired eyes. "Very well," she said simply. "I trust your judgment, my daughter, especially now." In the weeks that followed, formal communication began cautiously between the Veloth Dominion and distant human settlements, built initially upon the foundation of trust, established through everything aHFY and I had endured together. It was a small beginning, uncertain and fragile, yet undeniably real. I remained within Dominion territory longer than I had originally intended, assisting where I could as early discussions unfolded, watching as cautious curiosity slowly began replacing the fear and suspicion that had once defined how many among the stars viewed humanity. aHFY remained close throughout this time, our friendship deepening steadily into something neither of us had expected when I first found her chained within that darkened cell. She often joined me during quiet evenings within the palace gardens, discussing everything from Dominion history to simple stories of my own upbringing on Earth. "You changed everything for me," she told me one evening, the stars stretching endlessly above us. "Not simply by rescuing me, but by showing me a kindness I never knew existed beyond my own world." "You changed something for me too," I admitted. "I forgot, somewhere along the way, why doing the right thing still mattered. You reminded me." She smiled softly at that, something warm and genuine passing between us, unspoken yet clearly understood. As formal ties between our peoples slowly strengthened in the months that followed, stories began spreading quietly among the stars. Tales of a lone human who had rescued a Dominion princess from certain doom, asking for nothing in return beyond the hope of understanding between two very different worlds. Humanity's reputation, once whispered about with caution and fear, began shifting slowly into something new entirely. Respect, built not through conquest or dominance, but through simple, unwavering kindness in the face of impossible odds. And though the galaxy remained vast, Filled with countless mysteries yet to be discovered, I found comfort knowing that somewhere among the stars, trust between worlds had finally begun, sparked by nothing more than the simple refusal to leave someone, anyone, trapped alone in the dark.